Our presentation today is on the effects of Big Pharma on medicinal plants and is brought to you today by three presenters, myself, Mackenzie Johnson, Abigail Main, and Zoe Schultz. We're first going to start out with what is Big Pharma? Big Pharma is a collection of many different pharmaceutical companies around the world that works to develop, manufacture, and sell drugs to consumers. Big Pharma has been prevalent in our lives in the pandemic over the course of 2 years, and common names that you may know is Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and Abbott. And although Big Pharma appeals to many and is well known throughout the modern medicine, it is important to assess the profits and ensure that the motives of Big Pharma are focused on the well-being of patients. When we look at the market values, the pharmaceutical industry is estimated to reach 1.2 trillion within the year 2022, which represents a large portion of the Commonwealth. And in this way, it holds a central role as well as a responsibility, which is why it's important to analyze the profits that go along with this large amount of money. While Big Pharma is a part of the realm of healthcare, it is important to understand what the overall profits are used for in terms of progressing the well-being of patients that are using these pharmaceutical drugs. And when we compare the priority of profit versus research and development, the overall demand and priority for a larger profit consumes the goals of Big Pharma often not, which is not a thing that we want to be focused on when we're looking at money and healthcare combined. So when we look at research and development costs, they're often in competition with marketing expenses, and the overall profit continues to be favorably used to reach more consumers through ads and other measures instead of progressing and assessing the safety and effectiveness of drugs now and in the future. For example, in 2012, $3.5 billion was spent on ads of pharmaceutical drugs. And in this way, it allows patients to kind of self-prescribe drugs for themselves when they're sitting on the couch and they see an ad come across their screen. They can go to their doctor or go to their nearest pharmacy and often self-prescribe themselves with an illness that they deem to think that they may have. In this way, it is also supported by a Big Pharma executive herself, Lori Little, as she stated, our duty is to our shareholders to maximize the value. And in this way, shareholders are people that invest in companies. So we can see right there that the profit that Big Pharma makes often goes back to those shareholders. So it wouldn't be a surprise if they would want a larger profit to kind of occur. Vaccines are also super prevalent in our lives today. I mean, we can see that in some ways they are often capitalized as well. From 1999 to 2003, the revenues increased from 3.5 million to 8.8 billion, which is also a factor that's important to keep in mind in the minds of people, as they're extremely prevalent, again, in our world today. So finally, looking at one of these things is Big Pharma funds about 70% of clinical trials. And with this, they hold power because they have a right to review and comment on the results of drafts that are to be published since they're sponsoring that research. So a way that this has come into effect is when cholesterol was being analyzed, specifically LDL, the bad cholesterol levels, experts went and determined normal cholesterol levels. And Big Pharma, since they were a big representative in this trial, actually went in and wanted the good cholesterol levels to be ticked down a couple points, because in this way they would gain 36 million additional patients. And again, that's another way that they could kind of use consumers to gain a bigger profit. Now we want to make sure that we're focused on the overall well-being of patients. And in this way, when we are focusing on patients and not focusing on the well-being of patients, there's often a lack. And in this way, 2 billion people lack access to medications. And we can see this. If Big Pharma is using a lot of money for other things such as advertising, they could honestly be using money to help support these people that aren't or do not have medications available to them. We can also see that drug prices are increased by 525%, and these are often applied to those life-threatening medications where people have to choose whether or not they want to suffer from this life-threatening disease or illness that they may have, or purchase a drug for 525% of the normal cost that it could be prescribed for. And another thing to take into account is three-fourths of US citizens over 50 are taking some type of pharmaceutical drug. And these drugs are often leading to transgenerational damages. So in this way, when we look at the overall health and well-being of patients, some people don't need to be on these drugs. And when they are, it's often detrimental to their health. So now we're going to compare the herbal medicine market to the Big Pharma industry. So the use of botanical medicines has actually been around for thousands of years, specifically 60,000 years, and 75 to 85% of the world continues to rely on these botanical medicines to support their primary care. The herbal medicine market has a value of 80 or had a value of 83 billion in 2019 and has risen to about 500 or is expected to rise to about 550 billion by the year 2030. From 1990 to 2010, the use of botanical medicines increased by 380%. So we can see that there's a gaining popularity across herbal medicines. And today, consumers spend about 35 billion a year on alternative medicines. So we can see that there is some popularity in herbal medicines, but we also want to show how it is when it's compared to big pharma, there is a lack of popularity. So some people may be nervous on the overall costs of herbal medicines and how they might compare to pharmaceutical drugs. So in some cases, again, people think that it may cost more, but a supply of herbs for about a month would cost $30 to $50. And if that is too expensive, you can also go to your grocery store where they sell herbs, vegetables, and fruits that have those same medicinal properties that can help to benefit one's health. And when we compare this to pharmaceutical drugs, on average, a pharmaceutical drug costs between $12.41 to $97.57 on average. So for those that have to take multiple pharmaceutical drugs, it can get super expensive and often will surpass that month supply of herbal medications, or the amount that someone would spend on herbal medications or remedies, I should say.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Now that the differences in profits and costs devoted to each type of medicine have been highlighted, the question remains of why they are being treated differently. That begins by looking at the oversight and regulations placed on each. The Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, is responsible for approving all food, drugs, and herbal supplements that are sold to consumers. With that said, the difference between the herbal and modern medicine comes within their classification by the FDA. Herbal supplements are not held to the same standards as prescription drugs, but instead are categorized as dietary supplements, which are less strictly regulated. With this classification, their descriptions cannot suggest certainty when discussing that they cure, treat, or prevent illness. Instead, they are restricted to making structure or functional claims only, such as may increase immunity or support the body's natural defenses. These dietary supplement manufacturers are also required to ensure that their products are accurately labeled, that they are free of contaminants, and that they are founded in research that supports the claims that the product is found to be helpful and curative towards the human body. However, they do not require any trials to be conducted specifically for FDA approval, just that there is background evidence somewhere in the research literature. This is very different from prescription drugs. So that brings us to what the process is for typical synthetic drugs before they are approved by the FDA. In short, countless trials of research that begin as early as the developmental stage. There are 5 steps to drug development and approval. The first is when the drug is initially discovered and researched in a laboratory setting. Then the drug faces steps where it must be backed by this research. This is done on animals first, and then on people to test its safety and effectiveness. Once all the data has been gathered and reviewed, it is submitted to the FDA for approval consideration. Even if it is approved, though, and placed on the market, the FDA still continues to monitor its safety throughout the time it is sold. And at any point, if it deems that it's no longer safe, it can remove it from the shelves. It's obvious that much more research is put into modern drugs when compared to traditional medicine. In fact, the FDA actually places the burden on proving a drug's validity on its manufacturer, whereas the responsibility for proving a herbal supplement's validity is placed solely on the FDA, who may remove it from shelves if deemed unsafe. However, this is definitely a significant difference between the two. This lack of research and strict requirements have caused problems with the consistency and safety of herbal products due to their non-centralized regulatory structure. Due to the lessened regulations, there's a concern for the lack of consistency among herbal supplements. A study of the variability in a commercial ginseng product analyzed the different amounts of ginanoside and eleuteroside concentrations among 25 samples. These are the main concentrations that naturally occur within the plant. They found that the concentrations were concerningly varied from sample to sample. However, even more concerning is the fact that among the 25 samples tested, 11 had been labeled with the specific concentration of each of these substances, and all of them were actually incorrect. Out of the 11, 5 contain more than the label concentration, and 6 contain less. The true concentrations were in fact found within the samples to range from 10.8% to 327.7% of the labeled concentration. That's obviously a very big gap of error that could be significant when taking a supplement. The variability in these concentrations demonstrates and suggests the inherent need for standardization and more stringent testing of herbal remedies across the United States. So the question remains, how does Big Pharma then affect the use of medicinal plants, and how can we as a country better regulate its production? Well, it all starts with more research into medicinal plants and their scientifically proven benefits, not just the benefits that have been supported throughout history. However, this is difficult because Big Pharma monopolizes the drug industry and its testing. An increased use of medicinal plants would reduce Big Pharma's profits. This has led to a reliance on synthetic drugs and lack of education of herbal options within the United States because they obviously don't want their profits to decrease. So they don't put as much research into herbal remedies. This reliance that's been created has caused lives as well. Even after all the research required for FDA approval for drugs, approximately 100,000 people still die every year from adverse side effects of synthetic drugs. Additionally, a change in FDA classification is desperately needed. It is important to note that the FDA is unique in labeling herbal remedies as dietary supplements. In all other parts of the world, medicinal plants are regulated as and sold as medicine, as they should be, frankly. So clearly, we need to update ourselves with the rest of the world and change the way that we as the United States see medicinal plants. Also, obviously, gaining consumer trust and confidence in the products is what will make the biggest difference. This could come in the form of regulatory commissions such as the German E-Commission or the World Health Organization. These commissions certify the use of medicinal plants globally by publishing monographs with their uses, side effects, and any known drug interaction they may elicit. Liang et al. Also researched the ability of chemical fingerprints to assure quality control. These are similar to our fingerprints. No one is the same. So basically, they represent the chemical integrities of herbal products. And by doing this, they guarantee consistent concentrations within the same products across the board. Overall, perhaps if the United States moves towards a more global view on regulating these traditional medicines and places more research into how to properly assure the quality of each and every product, there will be more assurance overall of their safety and an increase in the trust that consumers are receiving the same product, including its plant parts concentrations, no matter where they shop or what they are buying.
Thank you, Zoe. I'm going to be talking about the education of traditional medicine with modern medicine. Herbal medicine has been documented and used since 2800 BC in China, and 1/4 of the population of the planet relies on the Chinese herbal medicine today. Recently, there have been concerns in communities regarding the safety and efficacy of herbal remedies. Informing society about herbal medicine and all of its benefits will limit conspiracies and doubts some people may have, and will enable more physicians to properly treat their patients. To begin, herbal medicine is not as common in the Western part of the world. Because it's not as common, there is more likely to be a lack of understanding surrounding herbal medicine and its usefulness. For example, many consumers of herbal remedies do not know that their use of herbal medicine can cause side effects just like conventional medicines do. But because the industry is slowly growing, properly educating physicians and consumers is becoming more and more necessary. In a Serbian study with 288 questionnaires completed by consumers who regularly purchase herbal medicines, only 11.1% of participants considered it necessary to inform their physicians about their use of herbal products. This can be dangerous because some herbs and drugs could cause fatal reactions when mixed, and physicians need to know about those reactions so that they can prevent them. Another reason herbal medicine is not as commonly practiced in the Western part of the world is the lack of education in undergraduate studies for pre-medical students. Most colleges recommend a pre-medical student to take courses like biochemistry, anatomy and physiology, microbiology, histology, pathophysiology, and other similar subjects. According to a study by Shuang Zhu and Mitchell Levine, respondents indicated low confidence in their competency when dealing with herbal medicines in practice. They lacked formal training on the subject and were not knowledgeable about the sources to refer patients to regarding herbal medicines. Half the respondents estimated that between 11 and 30% of their patients use herbal medicines, but 80% felt that less than 1 in 10 patients was sufficiently competent in the safe use of herbal medicines. This is especially concerning. Healthcare professionals are in charge of their patients' lives, and not getting properly educated on herbal medicine in college or in medical school could have fatal consequences. Plants and other natural sources form the base of medicine today, with about 25% of drugs worldwide being derived from plants. In a study conducted in Trinidad, where the use of herbal remedies is relatively high, a questionnaire was given to 192 physicians, and only 18 of them had access to information on herbal medicine at work. Only 30 of them have ever attended conferences or workshops where a paper on herbal medicine was presented, even though most physicians, 60.4%, believe that herbal medicines were beneficial to health. The gap in knowledge for healthcare professionals is clear and unsafe. If more healthcare professionals were educated on herbal medicine, they could treat more people and save more lives. Next, we will be discussing diseases that may have cures in medicinal plants. We will include the topics of heart disease, cancer, and COVID-19.
Thank you, Abby. I will begin by explaining heart disease and how medicinal plants can actually help to offer a cure or a benefit to help patients with this type of disease. So in America today, the American Heart Association estimates that about half of Americans suffer from a form of a cardiovascular disease, and a amount greater than 17 million deaths occur globally annually, which is a large amount of people that often suffer from a cardiovascular disease. Vascular dysfunction is a part of a cardiovascular disease. It often leads to organ damage via a stroke or a heart attack. Another common form of a cardiovascular disease is arteriosclerosis. So on the left-hand part of the screen, we're going to kind of address the risk factors of heart disease and lifestyle choices that connect. So diabetes, mellitus, hyperlipidemia, high LDL cholesterol, which is your bad cholesterol levels, can often be caused by a diet with high levels of saturated fats. Low HDL levels are also a bad thing that can work to cause a cardiovascular disease, because HDL is the good cholesterol that works to attack the LDL cholesterol, which is that buildup in your arteries, and it works to take those fatty buildups in your arteries to the liver to be recycled. But these low HDL levels can be caused by a lack of physical activity, obesity, smoking, diet, and also medication. So drugs that we talk about that are prescribed by Big Pharma can also work to lower these HDL levels, which your body actually needs a large amount to survive. And then hypertension is also a big major thing that works to create cardiovascular diseases in people. So now we're going to look at herbs that can help to supplement your health and your heart. So hawthorn and garlic are two major herbs that can work to support your cardiovascular health. They both contain bioactive ingredients that provide that medicinal property. So the bioactive component in hawthorn is flavonoid, and the bioactive component in garlic is the organosulfur compounds, and both of these work to treat hypertension, reduce oxidative stress. Specifically, garlic helps to decrease lipid contents in cells and limit the angiotensin converting enzyme, which works to lower hypertension. And another thing about these herbs, it's super important to realize that they're not just limited to a specific treatment plan. They also can help a wide variety of things in your body. But in this way, garlic is used to support your cardiovascular health. So again, looking at the right hand of the screen, we're looking to uphold a healthy endothelium, which is that inner layer of your arteries. And so these herbs that we use can work to help support that healthy endothelium. And there's also a chart on the right hand of the screen that shows all the different types of cardiovascular diseases and the amount of herbs that can be used to support them.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Interestingly enough, medicinal plants are already used in some extent in helping to fight cancer. The synthetically made compounds in chemotherapy are actually derived from naturally occurring active compounds in plants. A well-used example of this is the Pacific yew, known scientifically as the Taxus brevifolia. It is pictured to the right on the screen. The National Cancer Institute identified it to have anti-tumor properties in the 1960s while desperately searching for anything that could cure cancer. The main compound, Taxol, is especially effective in treating breast, ovarian, and lung cancers. However, with it being a chemotherapy, we know that it also is harmful to the human body. This is represented in its genus name, Taxus, which signifies that it is toxic and poisonous. But is there a place for medicinal plants in cancer treatments that doesn't include chemotherapy? The answer is yes. As Abby discussed earlier, integration of modern and traditional methods of healing are best when it comes to improving overall health. Therefore, medicinal plants are often used as complementary treatments to chemotherapy. First and foremost, they help patients increase their quality of life by aiding with the many negative side effects that chemotherapy treatments cause. This can be through boosted immunity or even just overall increased survival chances. But certain herbs are also could potentially serve as a treatment in themselves. An example of this is turmeric. Its active ingredient, curcumin, has been recently studied regarding its anti-cancer effects. Curcumin is a active ingredient that inhibits the proliferation, invasion, and apoptosis of various types of cancer cells. It is very unique in the fact that it doesn't report any toxicity towards humans or animals and has very few side effects attributed to it. Obviously, this is different than the chemotherapy we currently rely heavily on in cancer treatments, which does more harm than good, arguably sometimes. It is clear that there's a place for medicinal plants within oncology. However, once again, the lack of research is holding back our use of traditional medicine. And in this case, it could potentially be the missing piece to slowing a disease with a very high mortality rate globally that we have yet to understand how to treat most efficiently and effectively.
Last but not least, we have COVID-19. Since the pandemic began, there has been a need for preventative and therapeutic medicine, and society needed it quickly. Natural compounds possess various pharmaceutical properties and are more readily available and often cheaper than pharmaceutical drugs. Some natural compounds and various plants possess are reported as effective antivirals. Compounds like thymoquinone, quercetin, caffeic acid, ursolic acid, ellagic acid, vanillin, thymol, and rosmarinic acid could improve the immune response and have antiviral functions against COVID-19. The picture shows the viral genome and the important viral proteins like the S protein, the N protein, and the E protein. And the compounds bind to these proteins, which inhibits their functions. Here you can see all the listed compounds with their biological role, activity against COVID-19, and natural sources you can get that compound from. For example, caffeic acid has antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, and antiviral properties. It inhibits the virus attachment to the host cell and binds 3-CL protease, which inhibits viral replication. Caffeic acid can be found in blueberries, kiwis, coffee, cherries, apples, oils, and tea.
Well, we'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our presentation, especially the last part. We wanted to include that just to show how easily medicinal plants can play a role in our lives and the lives of our loved ones and families. If you do have any questions or thoughts that you'd like to tell us related to this presentation topic or anything really within this, please feel free to leave a comment below this video or directly email one of the presenters. Our 3 emails are there. You can let any one of us know and we'll get it to whoever had that section or we'll help answer the question for sure. Our sources will also be linked in the comments below for anyone who is interested in reading more about the topic. Thank you again, and we hope you enjoyed the presentation.